Aminata used to believe that love could survive anything, that if you gave and gave and gave some more, eventually the person you loved would see you really see you and choose you back. She held on to that belief even when the words stopped coming home sweet, when the glances became cold, and when Kwame, the man she married with trembling hands and hopeful eyes, started making her feel invisible inside their own house. Their wedding had been beautiful, one of those village ceremonies where color exploded in every direction, like the ancestors themselves were celebrating. Aminata wore a golden Ankara gown that hugged her fuller curves with pride. People said she looked like royalty. Her head wrap was tall and regal, her smile radiant. Kwame, lean and proud, held her hand like he'd just married the world. No matter what. He whispered into her ear that day, "You'll always be my queen." But words, Aminata would later learn, are easy to dress in silk and promises, much harder to clothe in action. At first, life was soft, quiet. He worked. She cooked. They laughed sometimes. They kissed, often. But time, like a slow-moving storm, changed things. It wasn't sudden, that's the worst part. It was gradual, so subtle that you don't realize your love is rotting until one day, all you can smell is the decay. The house filled with silence. Kwame started spending more time outside, more business meetings, more late-night deadlines, more phone calls he stepped outside to take. Aminata noticed perfumes on his shirt she didn't own, lipstick shades on napkins she never wore. But she didn't ask. She wasn't afraid of the truth. She was afraid of confirming what she already knew. She cooked. She cleaned. She stayed kind. She greeted him at the door. But with every month that passed, her body softened more, not from laziness, but from the weight of everything she carried in silence. Anxiety, emotional starvation, nights where she lay awake beside a man who slept like she didn't exist. The stress crept into her body, stored itself in her back, her legs, her belly. She began to avoid the mirror. Her laughter became quieter. Her food remained untouched even as she served plates full of it to Kwame. Her friends stopped calling. One by one, her world shrunk down to the four walls of a house that used to feel like a home. Still, she smiled. She always smiled. Until that one night. It was supposed to be a simple dinner, nothing fancy. Kwame had invited some of his business associates to their home for drinks and light food. The kind of night where everyone tells loud jokes and pretends they're more successful than they are. The house smelled of jollof rice, fried plantain, and roasted chicken. Aminata wore a red and black dress that used to be her favorite. It clung a bit too tightly now, especially around the waist. She had wrapped her hair in a gold scarf to make her face feel brighter. To feel seen. She stood at the table refilling drinks, smiling that smile you give when you're trying too hard not to notice you're being ignored. She laughed politely at their jokes, picked up empty plates, moved with the grace of a hostess. But inside, her chest felt hollow. Kwame hadn't looked at her once. The men laughed loud, expensive-sounding laughter. Suits, watches, fancy accents. Aminata brought out a fresh tray of meat pie and set it on the table. She turned to walk away when Kwame, halfway through a bottle of palm wine, turned to his friend, elbowed him playfully, and said with a grin, "Careful now, don't let the Hippo sit too close. She might crush the whole bench." The laughter that followed shook the walls. Aminata stood frozen. The tray in her hand trembled. Her eyes widened, searching Kwame's face for something: remorse, discomfort, anything, but his expression didn't flinch. He chuckled like he'd just said something clever. His friend choked on laughter. Even one of the wives giggled behind a wineglass. Aminata blinked. Once, twice. She placed the tray down gently, like it held something breakable. She whispered, "Excuse me," and walked away. No one stopped her. No one said her name. She entered the bedroom, closed the door softly, and sat on the edge of the bed. The silence was loud. Her heart pounded so violently it hurt. Her fingers dug into the fabric of her dress, like she could rip the memory out of it. Her ears burned with shame. Her throat ached. She looked down at her arms, her belly, her thighs. And for the first time in a long time, she hated them. Not because they were big, but because he had made her feel like they were disgusting. She didn't cry that night. Not at first. The tears didn't come like a storm. They came like a leak, slow, persistent, and quiet. She sat there for minutes, maybe hours, until suddenly she stood up, grabbed her slippers, and walked out the front door. No bag, no phone, no explanation. She just walked. She passed the corner where the mango tree grew. She passed the shop that used to sell her favorite butter rolls. She passed the old man who always sat outside with his radio, though even he didn't notice her tonight. The moon lit her path like it was trying to keep her company, but it didn't help. Her head hurt. Her chest was tight. She just wanted to disappear. When she reached Mama Ya's house, far from the noise, far from the laughter, far from the man who shattered her, she stood at the door shaking. The wooden frame, the curtain behind it, the smell of burning she oil, all familiar, all safe. The door opened slowly. Mama Ya, wrapped in her nightrobe, looked at her child, muddy dress, swollen eyes, broken heart, and didn't ask a single question. She opened her arms, and Aminata collapsed into them like a little girl. Only then did she finally cry. Mama Ya had always been a quiet woman, the kind whose silence said more than other people's shouting. That night, after Aminata cried herself empty, she simply wrapped her in a blanket, sat beside her, and hummed an old lullaby from their childhood village. It was the same song she used to sing when Aminata had fevers as a girl. A healing song, from ancestors who understood that pain didn't always need words. The morning sun filtered in through the raffia blinds, casting golden patterns on the clay walls. Aminata lay on the straw mat in Mama Ya's room, still wearing the torn red dress, her head resting on a woven cushion. Her eyes were dry now, but her face carried the weight of a woman who had broken quietly in the dark. Mama Ya brought her warm porridge and honeyed tea. She placed them beside her daughter without a word. Aminata sat up slowly, her body aching not from bruises, but from exhaustion. She tried to say something, anything, but her lips trembled and stayed closed. "You don't have to speak today," Mama Ya finally said, voice soft but firm. "But one day you will, and when that day comes, it will be thunder." Aminata broke again, not from pain this time, but from the softness in her mother's voice. It was the kind of love she hadn't felt in so long. She had forgotten what it tasted like. Later that day, she tried to scroll through her phone. Messages from neighbors, a missed call from Kwame, a few fake "Are you okay?" texts from women who had laughed the night before. Her hand shook, and she put the phone face down on the floor. She wasn't ready, not yet. For the next few days, Aminata moved like a shadow. She bathed in silence. She wore old wrappers and avoided her reflection. The only person who visited was Zuri. Zuri didn't knock. She never did. She barged in like a storm wrapped in earrings and attitude. A tall woman with mocha skin, bright lipstick, and a walk that made people shift in their seats. She took one look at Aminata and sucked her teeth. "This man, oh," she muttered, pulling off her sunglasses. "I will finish him with my slipper. Let me just see him in public." Aminata tried to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Zuri sat down beside her, took her hand, and whispered, "You're not staying like this. I won't let you. You hear me? You are not what he called you. And I don't care if your hips are wide or your belly soft. You're still Aminata. You are still her." But Aminata didn't feel like her. She felt like a shadow of the woman she used to be. The world outside went on. Kwame continued his parties. Neighbors gossiped. Some blamed her. She let herself go, they said. No wonder he got tired. Others whispered, "He's a man, what do you expect?" Only a few asked the real question. What kind of man destroys the woman who once believed he hung the moon? The worst part was, Aminata started to believe them. She would sit at Mama Ya's window, watching women walk past, some slender, some curvy, some laughing with lovers who held their hands, and she'd think, maybe I did become too much. Maybe I'm not beautiful anymore. Maybe. He was right. It was Mama Ya who shattered that thought like glass one rainy afternoon. She came into the room carrying an old calabash bowl filled with herbs and water. She knelt beside Aminata, dipped a cloth into the mixture, and began rubbing it on her arms. "Mama, what are you doing?" Aminata asked, startled. "Healing," Mama Ya replied. Not for your skin, for your soul. Aminata sat still. The herbs smelled like mint and earth. The warmth of her mother's hands felt like prayer. I watched you grow inside me, Mama Ya said, her voice low. You came out with fists clenched and eyes like lightning. You've always been a fighter. But this pain, this thing he did, it is trying to make you forget who you are. Aminata looked down, ashamed. Maybe I don't know who I am anymore. Then it's time to remember. That night, she couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, remembering things she had buried her dreams of opening a wellness studio for women, her love of dancing in the rain, the way Kwame used to make her laugh before he became a stranger. Somewhere deep inside her, something stirred. A voice. Faint, but present. Get up. At first, she ignored it. She turned over. But the voice came again, louder this time. Get up. She sat up slowly, legs swinging off the mat. The room was dark, but the moonlight crept in like a quiet visitor. She went to the mirror. The same mirror she had avoided for weeks. She looked, not just glanced, looked. Her face was rounder, yes. Her arms were softer. Her waist was thicker. But her eyes still held fire. She took off her wrapper. Stood there in her slip. She placed a hand on her stomach. Her thighs, her chest. She whispered, I'm still here. And she began to cry again. But this time, it wasn't from shame. It was from recognition. Somewhere in her reflection, she found a spark of the woman she had been before the world told her she was too much. And maybe, just maybe, she could find her way back to her. The next morning, before the rooster crowed, Aminata was already awake. Mama Ya found her sitting outside on the small wooden bench, wrapped in a shawl, eyes staring at the sky, like she was asking it for permission to breathe again. There was no sadness in her face anymore, just stillness. And something else, something rare. Resolve. Oh, I want to change, she said softly, not looking away from the horizon. But not for him. Not to prove anything to anyone. I want to change because I miss the woman I used to be. Mama Ya smiled, her face creasing like a well-worn map. Then let's begin. That very day, Aminata called Zuri. Zuri screamed when she picked up. Finally! I thought you died or joined a nunnery. What's going on? I need your help, Aminata said. But not your pity. I want to fight for me. You said I'm still her. So help me find her again. Zuri showed up 2 hours later with a duffel bag, a head wrap tied high like a crown, and a mouth full of motivation. We're starting with your mind, your body, and your wardrobe. In that order. You're about to become the Aminata people whisper about in envy. Aminata raised an eyebrow. And what exactly do they whisper? Zuri grinned. That the girl who got called a Hippo rose like a phoenix, and now nobody can touch her. It began slowly. Aminata's body still carried the weight of grief, so the first steps were quiet. Walks around the garden. Gentle stretches in the early morning light. Herbal teas from Mama Ya's hands. Journaling. Affirmations written in shaky handwriting on the walls. I am more than someone's punchline. My body is not a battlefield. My soul remembers who I am. Then came the food. No more eating only what Kwame liked. No more starving to look small. She began cooking for herself. Sweet potatoes with coconut stew. Boiled plantain with avocado and groundnut sauce. Nourishment became an act of rebellion. By the second week, Zuri dragged her to a small fitness circle for women in the neighboring village. It wasn't a gym. There were no mirrors, no machines, just dirt floors, water jugs used as weights, and women who had been told their entire lives that their bodies were shameful. And yet, they danced, they shouted, they sweat like warriors. Aminata stood in the back at first, self-conscious. Her stomach jiggled when she moved. Her arms trembled after only 2 minutes. But Zuri shouted from the front, "Don't stop, sis! Every drop of sweat is shame leaving your body." And so she kept moving, not to be thin, not to be small. To be strong, to be whole. Each week, Aminata felt something inside her shift. Her posture straightened. Her steps grew firmer. She looked people in the eye again. Her skin glowed with sweat and self-respect. And one day, she passed her reflection in a window and smiled. Not because she looked different, but because she finally recognized herself again. But the real twist came the day she got a call from Na Wellness Collective, a small women's health center in the capital that had once rejected her application for a position as a coach. "We saw your journey through Zuri's blog," the woman said on the phone. "We're expanding. We need someone who understands how to heal from within. Someone like you." Aminata's heart stuttered in her chest. "Are you offering me a job?" "Not just a job," the voice replied. "We want you to help design our new program for post-trauma recovery. You'd be mentoring other women, speaking, leading." Aminata's eyes filled with tears. She had spent so long believing she was invisible. Now the world was calling her name. When she told Mama Ya, her mother beamed with pride. "I told you, one day your voice would be thunder." She traveled to the city the next week, walked into the wellness center wearing a flowing indigo dress, her natural hair in thick coils, her stride sure and unhurried. The staff welcomed her with warmth. They had seen her before and after photos, heard snippets of her story, but they hadn't heard it from her mouth yet. That afternoon, she stood in front of 20 women seated in a circle, all different ages, all survivors of something: abuse, shame, grief, abandonment. Aminata took a deep breath. "My name is Aminata," she said, her voice clear. "And someone once laughed at me in front of a room full of people. He called me a hippo." The women tensed. "But that day," she continued, "wasn't the day I broke. It was the day I started waking up." One by one, their eyes softened. One woman began to cry. Another nodded slowly. Something powerful moved through that room. Like healing had found a way to become contagious. And in that moment, Aminata knew. She wasn't rebuilding herself to hurt Kwame. She was rising for every woman who had ever been told she wasn't enough. The city opened up to her like it had been waiting. Within months, Aminata's story began to ripple far beyond the wellness circle. Zuri, who had started sharing Aminata's journey online, watched in awe as the views climbed into the thousands. Comments from women across Africa, some in French, others in Hausa, Swahili, Zulu, flooded in like a wave. "You are telling my story. I didn't know I needed this until now. You are the reason I didn't give up today." And Aminata, once too scared to speak in her own home, now stood confidently on stages at women's conferences, speaking into microphones with power. Her words were not just stories. They were sparks. Every time she stepped to a podium in her flowing Ankara robes, with her natural hair braided like a crown, she brought something sacred with her. Truth wrapped in fire. What began as one invitation became a storm. Television shows asked for interviews. Newspapers wanted her before and after photos. Health organizations wanted to use her story in awareness campaigns for body confidence and emotional abuse recovery. She said no to most of them. She didn't want to be a symbol, not unless it helped real women, real lives. She created a program called Return to You. It wasn't about weight loss. It wasn't about revenge. It was about remembrance of the woman buried under shame and neglect, and the journey back to her. The first class was held in an old community center with cracked tiles and buzzing lights. By the third month, they had moved to a sponsored venue, with over 200 women attending weekly. Still, she hadn't seen Kwame. She didn't need to. But fate, or something stranger, had other plans. One afternoon, after leading a body movement and storytelling workshop in her home village, Aminata stepped out to the courtyard to catch her breath. The sky was bruised with twilight, and the air smelled like rain was coming. That's when she saw him. Kwame, standing by the gate. He looked smaller, not in size, but in spirit. His shoulders hunched, his suit wrinkled, his eyes tired. There was no crowd around him this time. No laughter. Just a man standing alone, staring at the woman he once broke. For a long moment, they said nothing. Then, softly, he spoke. Aminata. She tilted her head slightly. Kwame. He took a step forward. I didn't come to fight. I just wanted to say, I've seen you, on the news, online. I didn't know. You were capable of all this. She raised an eyebrow. Because I was fat? Kwame flinched. His gaze dropped. No, he mumbled. Because I was blind, and stupid, and cruel. She didn't move closer. She didn't invite him in. You humiliated me, she said, her voice calm. You made a joke out of my body in front of people who laughed with you. And I carried that pain in my skin, my chest, my stomach for years. He nodded. I know, I deserve every word. I came to say I'm sorry, not to ask for anything, just to say it out loud. Aminata looked at him for a long, silent moment. And then, to his surprise, she nodded. Apology accepted, she said. But forgiveness is not a door you walk back through. It's a road you walk away on. Kwame's eyes welled up. You've changed? No, she said softly. I returned to myself. The woman you met at the altar never left. You just stopped seeing her. He stood there for a moment longer, and then, with a slight bow, he turned and walked away. That night, Aminata sat with Zuri under the stars. They drank ginger tea and listened to the frogs sing in the nearby marsh. You good? Zuri asked. Aminata nodded. I think I am. Did it feel good seeing him like that? She paused, then smiled gently. It didn't feel good. It felt finished. Zuri raised her cup. To the death of bad love. Aminata clinked hers with it. And the birth of better ones. The following month, Aminata was named Voice of the Year by the African Women's Wellness Foundation. At the award ceremony, she wore the same color dress as the one from that terrible dinner party, this time tailored, beautiful, glowing on her full figure. When she stood on stage, lights bathing her in gold, applause rising like a wave, she felt no bitterness, just gratitude. In her speech, she didn't mention Kwame. She didn't have to. Every woman in the room knew what it meant to be torn apart and still choose to rise. I stand here not as someone who was broken, she said that night, her voice strong, but as someone who broke open and found light pouring out. 6 months later, the home she had once fled was quiet again, but this time it was a quiet of peace, not suppression. Aminata had finally returned, not to resume a marriage, but to reclaim a piece of herself from the shadows of the past. The home was hers now. After Kwame's formal apology, he had quietly filed for separation and left the village for good. No letters, no drama, just absence and emptiness that somehow brought clarity. The neighbors watched in awe as the once invisible woman renovated the house room by room, not out of bitterness, but out of rebirth. She painted the living room a deep sunrise orange. She filled the walls with framed affirmations and quotes from women who had survived storms. She replaced the dusty mirror in the bedroom with one surrounded by soft lights. And every morning, she stood in front of it, not to inspect, but to affirm. I am here. I am whole. I am worthy. The community's women, once passive spectators, now sought her guidance like pilgrims arriving at a shrine. They came with swollen faces, shaky voices, whispered stories of cruelty and neglect. And Aminata, never rushing their pain, offered them not advice, but space. One by one, they healed together. It was during one of these women's gatherings in her backyard, beneath the wide mango tree, that she saw young Ayo, a 16-year-old girl from 2 villages away, standing alone. Skinny arms, haunted eyes, clothes that hung too loose. Aminata approached gently. Would you like some tea? She asked. The girl shook her head. I don't belong here. I'm not like you. Aminata smiled softly. You are exactly like me. You're just earlier in the story. The girl's eyes widened. No one had ever said that to her before. Aminata reached into her satchel and pulled out a photograph one Zuri had taken in the early days of her healing. She was standing in her old wrapper, hair tied back, face swollen with tears. This was me, she said. Just 2 years ago. Ayo blinked. You looked broken. I was. And now? I'm still healing. But now I carry my scars like beads around my neck. Not for show, for memory. The girl nodded. For the first time, she smiled. Later that evening, Aminata sat alone on the back steps of the house, watching the sun collapse behind the baobab trees. The sky was pink and orange, painted like the wrapper her grandmother used to wear. She thought of everything she'd lost. The marriage, the years of silence, the woman she used to be. But then she thought of what she'd gained. Voice, purpose, community, herself. She had become more than a survivor. She had become a symbol without asking to be one. Just then, her phone buzzed. It was Zuri. Check the news right now. Curious, Aminata opened the link. It was a national feature story. The woman who transformed shame into power. Meet Aminata, the heart of Africa's body confidence revolution. There she was, standing tall on the cover image in her royal blue dress, arms crossed, expression soft but firm. The photo had been taken at her last community event. Behind her stood dozens of women of all sizes, shapes, and ages, laughing, dancing, proud. The article was glowing. But it wasn't just about her transformation. It was about the way she had created room for others to do the same. She smiled quietly, not with pride, but with peace. The next week, she was invited to speak at a university summit in Accra. The theme was Redefining Beauty in Modern Africa. She stood before hundreds of students, all eager, all open, and told them the story not of humiliation, but of rising. She ended her talk with these words. Someone once called me a hippo, thinking he was reducing me to a joke. But a hippo is strong. A hippo survives rivers, predators, and storms. A hippo doesn't need your permission to take up space. I used to shrink myself to be loved. Now, I expand myself to be free. And so should you! The crowd stood to its feet. Applause thundered through the hall. Back home that evening, Mama Ya was waiting with warm groundnut stew and a smile. You've become a storm, my daughter, she said proudly. And storms don't ask before they arrive. Aminata laughed. Then may I always keep raining. She walked outside into the evening. The moon was full. The wind was soft. She closed her eyes and whispered, To the girl I was, I forgive you for staying too long. To the woman I am, I thank you for coming home. And just like that, the final tear she hadn't even known she'd held fell. But this one wasn't from pain. It was from freedom.